Hey everybody, this is your main man Reg, and this is this week's version of Give Yourself Enough Credit. We got our Java going. Did some good stuff on a Monday, y'all. I'm here to tell you. And this is going to be good to you as well. The topic today is going to be Let Go My Repo. Yes, I said it. Let Go My Repo. We're going to talk about repossessions and how it affects credit. We've all, if it hasn't happened to you, it's probably happened to someone you know. You've probably been in a parking lot, you've seen that truck roll up, and they put a vehicle on there. Or they showed up at somebody's house. They might even showed up at your house. I don't know. I only make those illustrations to let people know that it's more common than people realize. I'm just going to give some information about what repossession is, how it affects credit, and what to do once it occurs. Sounds good? Thought you would like it. Look, our legal definition of repossession is the taking back of an item that has been sold on credit and delivered to the purchaser because the payments have not been made on it. That's essentially what this is. Most commonly, and today I'm just going to focus on vehicles. You can talk, if you're talking about houses, the term for it is foreclosure, but that's another discussion for another time. Here's a preventative measure when facing foreclosure, and a lot of people do their best to do this because a lot of people don't want to go through it because let's be honest, a lot of people don't want their stuff repossessed, and companies don't like to do it because they got to go to the trouble of trying to get money back on the loan and all that other stuff. So the preventative measure a lot of times is to try to work with the creditor. I know that doesn't sound like, work with the creditor, they're about to take my stuff. Well, actually, it might actually work because they might actually try to extend someone's payments to, they would rather do that and know they'll get some money versus repossessing it and not getting a guarantee of any money. Think about it that way. And for most companies, repossessing an item from someone, it's a last resort. They would try to do everything else than to do this. But after all that has failed, there is no other option. But there are times, and we've seen over the last year, okay, it's hard to, people have either been laid off, they've been furloughed, or their pay has been cut. So the things that they were able to do before, they can no longer do. And sometimes people are put in a position where this is unavoidable. So I want to make that clear as well, because some people are in this position not because of irresponsible spending habits. Some people are put in this position because their situation has changed and it was driven by other things. But here's the thing to remember. When this actually happens, some states, they have specific laws about what a company can and cannot do when it comes to repossession. Okay, they cannot damage your property to get to the item to try to repossess it. If they do, they could get sued for damages. They cannot use taunting or abusive or intimidating type tactics to repossess your stuff. They cannot do that. In some states, a company can get sued for that and be able to either lose rights to repossession or they're going to have to pay the debtor damages, depending on what they did to try to repossess that item. So that's something to keep in mind. If a repossession has been auctioned if it's about to be auctioned, they have to tell you when and where it is going to be auctioned. And here's why. You may not have the money at the time it's repossessed, but for some people, they might be at that auction and have the money to get their item back. Another thing is, with a repossession, some companies, in some states, the company has to hold that item for a specified period of weeks or months before they can actually sell the item. And what they don't tell you is that it is possible to go to that lender and you've got the balance, you can probably get your item back, depending on what it is. Some people, it works for them. If they can wipe out their balance, then instead of dealing with a repossession only, they can keep it from being a repossession plus possibly a collection. So that's why it's one of those things where if you go to a lender with the balance, it might be possible to pay it off, and they might try to work with the credit agencies to try to remove it from your credit report. There's no guarantee that they will, but these are possible scenarios to think about. Many people have gone through this, and some people never have, but they've seen it happen to someone else. All right, well, let's look at how repossession affects a credit report. And we all know something like this can wreak pure havoc on your credit. And here's how. Let's take late payments, for instance. That's considered, that can be any payment that's considered 30 days late. That can appear as a black mark on your report. There's no guarantee that it will. For some people, it's 30. So some companies, depending on the lender, it could be 30, it could be 60, it could be 90, it could be as far as 120 days, depending on what it is. A loan default. Okay, a lot of times, this is at a lender's discretion. So that could be 30 days, that could be 60 days, that could be 90 days, that could be 120 days. Sometimes it could actually be longer. A lot of times that's up to the lender. Okay? Vehicle repossession. The thing about vehicle repossession is this. Once it's in default, the lender can actually repossess the vehicle. And that is an actual mark on the credit. So a late payment could be a mark. If it goes into default, that could be a mark. And then once the vehicle is repossessed, that could be a mark. So that's why it's very easy for someone to possibly go from 650, 700 to almost down to a 400 credit score if this is their situation. I'm just explaining that scenario. I don't know one in particular, but I'm just kind of pointing out how something like this can happen. Now, here's this thing called a deficiency balance. Once a vehicle's been repossessed, a lender may try to sell off the vehicle to recover some of the losses. You got the amount owed at the time that's being repossessed. You got the amount that the lender may sell the property for. If that does not equal zero, that becomes the deficiency balance. The lender could come back and tell you, once they've sold this vehicle, that there's a remaining balance. They could say you could owe it. Now, another way to possibly mitigate damage to your credit is that if you can pay off that mitigating balance, they might work to try to get that repossession pulled from your credit report. There's no guarantee that they will, but it has happened in some instances, okay? And in severe cases, if the deficiency balance can't be recovered, a lender may or may not turn it over to a collection agency. A lot of that's going to depend on the amount. If it's a lot of money, a whole lot of money, yes, they might try to do that because they're probably going to sell off that debt to them and make something. But if it's a relatively small amount, they may do it, they may not. I don't know. Just depends on the situation, okay? And another thing is called judgment. And this is if it's sent to a collection agency. And depending on the amount, if they attempt to sue you and they actually win that suit, that could be another mark on your report. So that's 6 different ways that repossession can affect your credit. Now, how does a repossession affect that credit score? Well, I can tell you what. Just the repossession alone can do as much as a 100-point drop. And that's not counting all the other things that preceded, okay? Now, we talked about repossession. We talked about what it can do. We've talked about what lenders can do. We've talked about what we as a consumer can do. Let's look at there's ways to repairing credit after repossession. One way is to clear your remaining balance. So if a lender tries to recoup its losses and there's a way to work something out, that might be the most expedient way to try to do it. And that's provided the person has the money to do it. A lot of times, that's part of the problem. If they had the money to pay it and they weren't able to do that, then the lender is kind of like, okay, look, I got to do what I got to do here. Paying your bills on time, paying a good payment history always has a lot to do with the credit score. A lot of times are not always good for people. People fall on hard times. Sometimes it's because of bad financial decisions, and sometimes it's because of things that we can't control. And sometimes it's a combination of both of these things. But it is possible to recover from them if we take better steps in the future. Another route is to dispute the credit report if there are inaccuracies in it. So those are other ways. Those are other ways of doing that. If something's not correct, that's another way that you could possibly fix whatever it is and get it done. Especially if it's not inaccurate, or especially if it's after a period of time. Another way is to drop your credit utilization ratio. Typically, good credit utilization ratio is anything 30% or below. So if that exceeds that, if there's ways to kind of either, and the ways to do that is decrease the amount of credit you're using, or if at all possible, add positive trade lines to increase the amount of credit you have, and that's going to lower your ratio. Here are the key takeaways from this info segment. When a repossession occurs, it can drop your credit score by as much as 100 points or more. That's pretty serious. But when it does occur, it is possible to recover from it. Some people have gotten vehicles repossessed or items repossessed, and they've been able to come back and improve their financial health again. I want to be very clear about that one. Another thing I want you to know, if it does happen, it doesn't have to stay on your credit report. And the thing about it is, yes, the average repossession, if no action is taken to dispute it or to remove inaccurate information, it can stay on the report as much as 7 years. But there are ways that to reduce that time. Now, if you want to know more about this, I encourage you to look at the website for the Federal Trade Commission. This is the nation's consumer agency, and they can tell you a lot of the laws and the guidelines and the things that they do that is for the consumer when it comes to this kind of thing, and so many more, and so many more things. You can find this on the internet at www.ftc.gov. This spells out, you can find out, and this will spell out to a large degree at the federal level what a creditor can and cannot do when it comes to repossession. Now, I will also say this. Each state has its own set of laws as far as what you can and cannot do as the debtor and what they can and cannot do as the creditor. So it's going to depend on the state that you live in. So I encourage you to research that part for yourself, depending on where you live. Now, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more of these. I do these to educate and empower, because not all the time stuff like this is taught in school. A lot of times we find this stuff out when we get in the situation, and by that time it's already done. Now, I'm sure all of us at one time or another have said, you know what? If I knew then like I know now. Reggie said that at one time or another too. So I want to help my brothers and sisters all over the world, no matter who you may be, no matter what you look like, because we all encounter these type of situations. With that being said, this is your main man, Reg. I want you to give yourself enough credit. And I want you to think about this. You don't have to compete with anyone. But think about this. Strive to be better today than you were the day before. This is your main man, Reg. I love you guys. Take care of yourself.